Okay everyone, we're going to move on to solving equations with the distributive property. So obviously you need to know what the distributive property is, and we actually reviewed it just recently when we did multiplying monomials times polynomials from the last chapter. But just in case you forget, here you go. It's when you multiply the term in front of a bracket by every term inside the bracket. Remember, it looks something like this. Sometimes I know it makes some math teachers cringe, but I call it mountains or feed the chickens. Remember this A here, you're going to throw the seed in here, you're going to throw the seed in there, and now you fed both the chickens inside the pen. I know that's awful. And I also call it mountains because it makes these beautiful mountains here. And so A times B is AB and A times C is AC. That's the distributive property. You know this. So in this one, for example, we're multiplying 3 times 5x minus 2. We have a binomial here. So you'd be multiplying 3 times 5x, and you'd also be multiplying 3 times negative 2. 3 times 5x is 15x, and 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. That's how the distributive property works. Let's do one more. You have this negative 4 out front. You're going to multiply it by the 6. You're also going to multiply it by the negative 7n. Remember, you always look at the sign in front. So negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. Don't write down a sign now, because negative times negative here makes a positive. 4 times 7n is 28n. Okay, so we're just going to add that step into solving equations. So far we have 2 steps here. We're going to end up with about 6 or 7 steps total when we get to the really hardest ones. So our first step is get rid of the brackets. You don't want to have brackets when you're solving equations, so you're going to get rid of the brackets by using the distributive property, which we just talked about. And then you're going to isolate the variable. And remember the order. You're going to try to add and subtract before you multiply and divide. Alright, let's do a few questions. So we want to know what this W is equal to, right? We want to isolate that W. But I see we have brackets and distributive property happening. So the first thing you want to do is actually expand. That's another way of saying use the distributive property. You want to expand. So we're going to multiply 4 times W and 4 times negative 2. Well, 4 times W is 4W, and 4 times negative 2 is negative 8, and this side still equals negative 8. Now we're back to the questions like you did last time, right? We want to get that W all by itself, and the numbers that are problems here are the 4 and the negative 8. So we're looking for a step where you add or subtract first. Well, since this is minus 8, we could get rid of that by adding 8. And what we do to one side, we do to the other. These 8's are gone, and you're left with 4W on this side. Negative 8 plus 8. What do you have more of, negatives or positives? You've got the same number. You got 8 of each. So what happens? They cancel them all out, and you end up with 0. That's okay. Don't panic just because you got 0. Just keep following the rules. We want to get this W all by itself, and we still have this problem number right there, that 4. What's that 4 doing? It's 4 times W, so we're going to do the opposite. We're going to divide by 4. What we do to one side, we do to the other. So the 4's are gone, and we have W, and 0 divided by 4. When you divide 0 by anything, you get 0. And you're done. Now, I've been doing this every video, so I'll do it once more today. What happens if you're not sure if you got this right or not? Then what you would do is you would take your answer, the 0, and you'd plug it in here. So you would end up with, I'm going to actually write it this time, you'd end up with 4, and then where the W is, I'm going to put 0 minus 2, and we want to know, does that equal negative 8? Now, if I was doing this, I wouldn't use the distributive property. I don't have to. I could actually do the bracket first, couldn't I? 0 take away 2 is negative 2. And is it true that that equals negative 8? Well, let's see. 4 times negative 2 is, yes, it does equal negative 8. It worked. I have the right answer. Alright, next one. So, got to get rid of those brackets. Multiply, multiply. Use the distributive property. Negative 5 times 4. That's only one negative, so it's going to be negative, and 5 times 4 is 20. Don't write down the sign. Negative times negative is positive. Now write down the sign. 5 times x. Remember, there's a 1 in front here, so it's like 5 times 1. 5x, and it equals 10. Great. Now we're looking for a step where you add or subtract. Well, since this is negative 20, I'm going to add 20 to both sides. 20's cancel. I'm left with 5x equals 30. And the last step, this is 5 times x, so I do the opposite and divide both sides, of course. And I end up with x equals 6. Next, just because the brackets on the other side doesn't make any difference, I'm going to use the distributive property here, expand. So I have 27 here. On the other side I have 3 times 3x, which is 9x, and 3 times positive 6 is positive 18. And away we go, looking for a step where we add or subtract. Of course, these are the problem numbers, this and this, because we want to get that x all by itself. So why don't we subtract 18 from both sides? 27 minus 18 is 9, and I still have 9x on this side because the 18's canceled. This is 9 times x, so we do the opposite of timesing. We divide. 9 divided by 9 is 1, and over here the 9's cancel, and you're left with x, and we're very happy with that answer. Okay, lots of negatives in this one, but it really doesn't make a difference. You're going to expand, use the distributive property. Negative 4 times negative 2. Well, 2 negatives make a positive, and 4 times 2 is 8. You don't need to put positive 8, you can just put 8. Now, negative 4 times negative 2x. Again, we have a negative times a negative, which is a positive, and 4 times 2x is 8x. And then we have negative 8. Alright, our goal is to isolate the variable. Got to get rid of this 8, and we got to get rid of this 8. We got a lot of 8's in this question. So which one can we add or subtract? The first one. So we're going to minus 8 from both sides. This is gone, so we're left with 8x over here. This does not equal 0. This is negative 8, take away 8. I like to add the opposite. So you have 8 negatives and 8 more negatives. That means you have a lot of negatives. How many do you have total? 8 and 8 make 16 negatives. Last step, in order to get the x by itself, since this is 8 times x, we do the opposite. We divide by 8. 8's cancel, you're left with x. Negative 16 divided by 8. Only one negative, so it's going to be negative, and 16 divided by 8 is 2. Okay, scary decimals, does not make a difference. We still use the distributive property. So 1.1 times x is just 1.1x, and 1.1 times negative 2, it's going to be negative, and 1.1 times 2 is 2.2. I assume that's okay. Equals 1.65. Okay, we need to get the x by itself, so we got to get rid of the 1.1 and this negative 2.2, or this minus 2.2. We're looking to add or subtract first, so let's add 2.2 to both sides. So on this side, we still have 1.1x. On this side, I kind of lined up the decimals here. I can put a 0 in the space. 5 plus 0 is 5. 6 plus 2 is 8. 1 plus 2 is 3. And the decimal moves straight down. It goes right there. Almost done. We still need to get rid of this 1.1, and that's 1.1 times x. So we will divide by 1.1 and divide by 1.1. I love long division, so I'm going to long divide. Now remember, when we long divide, you do not want the number out front to have a decimal. So we're going to move the decimal over one spot and give us 11, which means we also need to move the decimal over one spot here and get 38.5. Decimal moves straight up. 11 goes into 3, no. 11 goes into 38, yes, 3 times. 3 times 11 is 33. Subtract and you get 5. Bring down the 5. Oh, perfect. 11 goes into 55. 5 times, and that's it. We're done. So our answer is 3.5. Yes, you can use a calculator for these questions. You don't have to do long division. Okay, here's another one. They're all the same today. We're using the distributive properties to start. So we're going to go 3.5 times 4. We could do that long multiplication if you want. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14. And we need to move the decimal over one spot, right? We want one number after the decimal. So you get 14.0. But 14.0 is the same as 14. And then 3.5 times negative 2. Well, that's just one negative, so it's going to be negative. And 3.5 times 2. If you want, we could do that as well over here, but you can probably do it in your head. 2 times 5 is 10, carry the 1. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. We need one number after the decimal point, which is right there. Oh, so the answer is just 7. So we ended up with 14 minus 7x equals 0. Don't worry that there's a 0 here, just keep following the rules. We want to get this x by itself. Problems are 14 and negative 7. which number would we add or subtract? We would subtract the 14. So that's gone. What's left here? Be careful. You have negative 7x's left. 0 take away 14. If you want, you can change that 0 take away 14 into 0 plus negative 14 if you want. Either way you do it, you're going to get negative 14. Last step, this is negative 7 times x. We want to do the opposite of timesing, so we want to divide. What do you divide by? You need to be able to wipe out this negative 7, so you better divide by negative 7. The only way you can cancel it is if you divide by the exact same thing. So negative 7 on both sides. Now we can cancel the negative 7s and just have x left. And over here we have a negative divided by a negative, which makes it positive, and 14 divided by 7 is 2. Okay, last couple here. Distributive property. So 5 times negative 2y. It's only one negative, so it's going to be negative. 5 times 2y is 10y. Then 5 times positive 4. Well, that's a positive amount, and 5 times 4 is 20, and it still equals 7. Okay, which one number can we add or subtract? We can subtract 20. Subtract 20. So you get negative 10y equals 7 take away 20. If you have trouble with that, 7 take away 20, you could always add the opposite. What do you have more of, positives or negatives? Definitely negatives. You have 20 of them, so it's more of those. And how much more is 20 than 7? It's 13 more. Okay, we've got to get that y by itself, and this is negative 10 times y, so we're going to do the opposite and divide. Remember to divide by exactly the same thing, negative 10, and divide by exactly the same thing, negative 10. So here the negative 10s cancel, and you get y. On the other side, you have a negative divided by negative, so it's going to be positive, and 13 divided by 10. Huh? That doesn't go in evenly. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's fine. 13 divided by 10, you can put 13 over 10. Or you could make it a mixed fraction. How many 10s go into 13? 1, with how much left over? 3, and keep the denominator the same. Or 13 over 10, if you were to divide that, just go 13 divided by 10. You know how to divide by 10. Move the decimal over one spot, you get 1.3. Any of these answers are great. My preference is these two, but the mixed fraction is totally great too. And finally, you are going to use the distributive property here in a sense, because what number is kind of after this minus sign here? It's kind of like there's a negative 1 there. So you're going to go negative 1 times 12x and negative 1 times negative 2. The other way you can think about it is if you have a negative out front of a bracket, every sign changes inside the bracket. Everything's going to change. So we still have 82 here. Negative 1 times 12x. Well, that's just one negative, so it's going to be negative. And 1 times 12x is negative 12x. Now negative 1 times negative 2. Well, negative times negative makes it positive, and 1 times 2 is 2. So do you see what happened? I'm just going to erase this for a second. Because there was a negative out front, our 12x became a negative 12x, and our negative 2 became a positive 2. This is the impact a negative will always have when it's in front of a bracket. It just changes all the signs. But you can also think of it as distributive property, negative 1 times this and this. Alright, away we go. We want to get this x all by itself, so we got to get rid of the negative 12 and the positive 2. Which one do we add or subtract? The 2. Since it's plus 2, we minus 2 and minus 2. So 82 minus 2 is 80, and we still have negative 12x over here. This is negative 12 times x, so we do the opposite operation and divide. Divide by exactly the same thing, negative 12, and of course we do the same over here. So on this side, the negative 12's cancel, and you're just left with x. On this side, there's only one negative. A positive divided by a negative makes a negative, and you have 80 over 12, which doesn't go in evenly. However, that's not going to be your final answer, is it? How come? Because you can put it in lowest terms. What can you divide them both by? I could divide them both by 4. If you divide 80 by 4, you get 20, and if you divide 12 by 4, you get 3, and it's still negative. So that's a good answer. Or you could make it mixed fraction. How many 3's go into 20? 6. That gets you up to 18, and you have 2 left over. Denominator stays the same. And it's still negative. Don't forget the negative. Or you could take your calculator and go 20 divided by 3, and you'll get 6.666666666. So in other words, 6.6 repeating, and it's still negative. So I guess this time I'll circle them all. I'm not as huge a fan about the mixed one, but there's nothing wrong with it. I just have this weird thing where I don't like mixed fractions as much. Anyway, that's it. That's a distributive property. We're moving along day by day, getting harder and harder and harder, and we'll take another step in the next video. Okay, everyone, take care and keep those questions coming. Bye.